This video is a reading of the Middle English text, Dialogue Between a Lord and a Clerk by John Trevisa. The original text, as well as the translation thereof, will appear on the screen as I read it, so that the viewer can actively compare the two. The reader I read this text from is A Book of Middle English by Thorlak Turville Peter and J.A. Burrow. Before I begin reading the dialogue, I'll first read the brief introduction provided in the book, which gives some historical background for the text. John Trevisa was born about 1342, studied at Oxford University, became a fellow there, and was ordained priest in 1370. He enjoyed the patronage of Thomas IV, Lord Berkeley of Berkeley Castle, Gloucestershire, and became his chaplain and also vicar of the town of Berkeley. He died in 1402. His chief writings are translations of three major Latin works of the period: the Polychronicon of Ranulph Higden, A World History; De Proprietatibus Rerum of Bartholomeus Anglicus, an encyclopedia; and a book of advice for rulers, the De Regimine Principum of Aegidius Romanus. Trevisa's dialogue between a lord and a clerk accompanies his English Polychronicon, along with a letter, not printed here, dedicating the translation to "My worthy and worshipful Lord, Sire Thomas, Lord of Berkeley." The Latin Polychronicon is a vast history of the world, written by Ranulph Higden, a monk in the Benedictine Abbey of Chester in the 1320s, and subsequently worked on by him up to his death in the 1360s. The book soon became a bestseller and survives in more than 100 manuscripts. Trevisa's English version was underway in 1385, and he completed it in April 1387. Although the prefatory dialogue is set at Berkeley, it is to be read as an expository fiction modeled on other such dialogues in Latin. Its subject is translation. Trevisa compliments his patron by attributing to Dominus all the good arguments for his own translating activity, reserving for himself, in the person of Clericus, only the reactionary objections against it. It was a common form of apology for medieval writers to claim that they undertook some great task only because they were urged or commanded to do so. I shall now begin reading Dialogue Between a Lord and a Clerk. Saith that Babil was y bold, men speaketh divers tongues, so that divers men both strange to other, and knoweth nocht of her speech. Speech is nocht I know, but yifhit belorned. Common learning of speech is behoiring, and so alway deaf is alway dumb, for he my nocht hure speech for to learne. So men of ser contraries and londas that have divers speeches, yef neither of ham have learned other speech, neither of ham wot what other meaneth. Thai he mate and have great need of information and of lore, of talking and of speech. Be the need never so great, neither of ham understandeth other speech, no more than jangling of geese. For jangle they on never so vast, that other is never the wiser, thai a shrew him instead of good moru. This is a great mischief that wolveth no mankind, but God of his mercy and grace hath ordained double remedy. On is that some man learneth and knoweth many divers speeches, and so between strange men of the which neither understandeth other speech, such a man may be main, until either what thother will mean. The other remedy is that an language is learned, used, and known in many nations and lands, and so Latin is learned, known, and used specially to this half grace in all the nations and lands of Europa. Therefore, clerks of her goodness and courtesy maketh and writeth her books in Latin, for her writing and books should be understood in divers nations and lands. And so Ranulph, monk of Chester, wrote in Latin his books of chronics that describeth the world about in length and in breadth, and maketh mention and mind of doings and of deeds, of merveils and of wonders, and reckoneth the years to his last days from the worst making of heaven and of earth. And so therein is noble and great information, and lore to him that kan daarin read and understande. Therefore, each world have those books of chronics translated out of Latin into English, for the more men should him understande and have thereof cunning, information, and lore. Those books of chronics both written in Latin, and Latin is used and understande at this half grace in all the nations and lands of Europa. And commonly English is not so weed understande, used and ignored, and the English translation should no man understande but Englishmen alone. Then who should the more men understande the chronics, they are translated out of Latin that is so weed used and ignored into English that is not used and ignored but of Englishmen alone? This question and doubt is easy to assoil, for if these chronics were translated out of Latin into English, then be so many the more men shall understand him as understandeth English and no Latin. Ye kunne speak and read and understand Latin, then he needeth not to have such an English translation. I deny this argument, for thy I kunne speak and read and understand Latin, there is much Latin in these books of chronics that ye cannot understand, neither thou without studying and avisement and looking of other books. Also, thy it were not needful for me, it is needful for other men that understandeth no Latin. Men that understandeth no Latin may learn and understand. Nocht alla, for some may not for other manner business, some for elder, some for the fault of wheat, some for the fault of cattle, other of friends to wind ham to school, and some for other divers the faults and letters. It needeth not that all such know the chronics. Speak not to straightlich of thing that needeth, for straightlich to speak of thing that needeth, only thing that is and may not fail needeth to be, and so it needeth that God be, and God is and may not fail. And so for to speak, no man needeth to know the chronics, for it might and may be that no man ham knoweth. Otherwise, to speak of thing that needeth, somewhat needeth for to sustain, other to have other things there be, and so meat and drinketh, needeth for keeping and sustenance of life. And so for to speak, no man needeth to know the chronics, but in the threede manner to speak of thing that needeth, all that is profitable needeth. And so for to speak, all men needeth to know the chronics. Then he that understandeth no Latin mo ax and be informed and he taught of him that understandeth Latin. Thus speaks wonderlich, for the leud man would not what should ax, and namelich of lore of deeds that come never in his mind, nother what commonlich of homa should ax. Also not all men that understandeth Latin have such books to inform leud men. Also some connath not, and some will not, and some more not a wheel, and so it needeth to han an English translation. The Latin is both good and fire, therefore it needeth not to han an English translation. This reason is worthy to be plunged in applaud and laid in powder of lewdness and of shame. It might well be that thou makest this reason only in mirth and in gam. The reason mot stonde, but he be assoiled. A blere ied man, but he were all blind of wheat, michte I say the solution of this reason. And they were blind a micht grope the solution, but yet his veiling him failed. For yet this reason were ocht worth, be such manner argument me micht prove that all 310, and Aquila, Symmachus, Theodosion, and he that made the fifth translation, and Origenes were lewdlich occupied when he translated Holy Writ out of Hebrew into Greek. And also that Saint Jerome was lewdlich occupied when he translated Holy Writ out of Hebrew into Latin. For the Hebrew is both good and fire, and he writ be inspiration of the Holy Ghost. And all these were her translations, both highly praised of all Holy Church. Then the foresight David reason is worthy to be putrid, laid a water, and sussed. Also Holy Writ in Latin is both good and fire, And yet for to make a sermon of Holy Writ all in Latin, to men that connath English and no Latin, it were a lewed deed. For he both never the wiser for the Latin, but it betold him on English what it is to men. And it might not be told on English what be Latin is to men without translation out of Latin in English. Then it needeth to have an English translation. And for to keep it in mind that it be not for youth, it is better that such a translation be made an ivrita than is said and not ivrita. And so this foresaid lewed reason shall mave no man that hath any wit to leave the making of English translation. A great deal of those books standeth much be Holy Writ, be holy doctors, and be philosophy. Than those books should not be translated into English. It is wonder that thou makest so feeble argumentis, and hast to go so long to school. Aristoteles' books and other books also of logic and of philosophy were translated out of Grew into Latin. Also at praying of King Charles, John Scott translated St. Denis his books out of Grew into Latin. Also Holy Writ was translated out of Hebrew into Grew, and out of Grew into Latin, and then out of Latin into French. Then what hath English trespassed that he might not be translated into English? Also King Alfred, that founded the University of Oxenford, translated the best laws into English tongue, and a great deal of the Psalter out of Latin into English. And mad Werefrith, Bishop of Worcester, translated Saint Gregory his books Dialogus out of Latin into Saxon. Also Kedman of Whitby was inspired of the Holy Ghost and made wonder poesies and English, nich of all the stories of Holy Writ. Also the holy man Beda translated St. John his Gospel out of Latin into English. Also thou wast where the Apocalypse is written in the walls and roof of a chapel both in Latin and in French. Also the Gospel and prophecy and the rectify of Holy Church mote be taught and preached to Englishmen that connath no Latin. Then the Gospel and prophecy and the rectify of Holy Church mote be told him in English, and that is not do but be English translation. For such English preaching is very English translation, and such English preaching is good and needful. Then an English translation is good and needful. If a translation were made that might be amended in any point, some men hit would blame. If men blameth that is not worthy to be blamed, then he both to blame. Clerk knoweth well enough that no sinful man doth so well that he ne michte do better, not maketh so good a translation that he ne michte make better. There were Origenes made 2 translations, and Jerome translated 3 the Psalter. It is here no translation of those books the best that might be, for that were an idle desire for any man that is new here alive. But it would have a skillful translation that might be known and understood. Whether is you ever have a translation of those chronics in rhyme or in prose? In prose, for commonly prose is more clear than rhyme, more easy and more plain to know and understand. Than a god ground grass greatrich to gain, wit and wisdom wisely to wirche, mich and mind of recht meaning to make translation tristy and true, placing to the Trinity 3 personas and O God in majesty, that ever was and ever shall be, and made heaven and earth and licht for to shine, and departed a licht and darkness, and kleeped a licht die and darkness nicht. And so was made evtid and morrowtid on die that had no morrowtid. The second day he made the firmament between waters, and departed the waters that were under the firmament from waters that were above the firmament, and kleeped the firmament heaven. The 3rd day he gathered the waters that both under heaven into one place, and made the earth unhealed, and kleeped the gatherings of waters seas and 3 earth land, and made train and grass. The 4th day he made sun and moon and stars, and set him in the firmament of heaven. Wherefore to shin and to be toknes and signes to departe times and yeres and nicht and die. The 5th day he made voles and breedes in air and fishes in the water. The 6th day he made beasts of the land and man of earth, and put him in paradise for he should watch and won therein. But man brak God his hester. He fell into sin and was put out of paradise into woe and sorrow, worthy to be damned in the pain of hell without any end. But the Holy Trinity had mercy of man, and the Vader sent the Son, and the Holy Ghost lichted on a maid, and the Son took flesh and blood of that blissful maid, and died on the road to save mankind, and arose the 3rd day glorious and blissful, and talked to his disciples, and steer into heaven when it was time, and shall come a day of doom and them quick and dead. Then all men that both written in the book of life shall wend with him into the bliss of heaven, and that be there in body and in soul, and say and know his Godhead and manhead in joy without any end. If you enjoyed this video, please check my channel in the future, as I intend to make more videos about the English language, including about Middle English. And until next time, fare ye well.